here we go with round 1, immediately facing a hand that can cast Boros Reckoner on turn 3. We do have Gruul Keelrune into mugging if we don't do anything else, and that accelerates us into Ripscale Predator. So I'm not too scared of the mana base being a problem with this game. Gruul Charm also potentially being a blowout if our opponent is playing flyers. Not a great hand, but I think with a slow approach our deck is taking, it's a hand that it would always keep. We are on the draw, so we do have some time to draw into our cards, and we might be looking at a mirror here. No, it looks like it is a Simic deck, maybe Splashing Gruul, and we have an interesting decision already. There might be a Shamble Shark coming, and Gruul Charm could be used very effectively if our opponent plays a Drakewing Crasis next turn, and that would mean if we have the Forest in play, that we can Gruul Charm end of turn. However, if we draw Boros Reckoner, then we want to have all the red mana in play. But given that the Reckoner is only a 1 in 31 chance, I think it's better to keep our options open here. That said, it's not even clear if we should actually pull the trigger on Gruul Charm immediately. So that's maybe something that I should have considered first. Now, I gave myself the option to Gruul Charm, but our opponent didn't play Shamble Shark end of turn, so the pressure is actually less, and the Gruul Charm has the potential to get another creature if our opponent drops another flyer. Now, the most common flyers in Simic are just Drakewing Crasis, and then maybe Nimbus Swimmer, but our opponent would probably wait another turn to play that. So, given that we have mugging and pit fight, so we aren't lacking in removal, I think that we can use our first Gruul Charm here to just make sure that we don't take any damage, and we are, at the same time we don't allow our opponent to utilize any Cypher cards he might have or whatnot. There's also the problem of the longer you wait, the more likely it becomes that your opponent has a card that doesn't blow you out, but that negates what you're trying to do, countering your Gruul Charm or responding with something like a Simic Charm. So at this point, we can already start attacking with Gruul Keelrune, and the fact that we have Skinbrand Goblin means that we can use it to push through the Denizen, although it's very unlikely that the Denizen is going to block. It simply doesn't really have a reason to do so. However, I would like to get my opponent down to 17, because Ripscale Predator just becomes a lot more threatening. I think that we might be the aggressor in this matchup, and we give our opponent the option to block here, which isn't irrelevant. Like I said, it's unlikely, but if he does block, we are using the Skinbrand Goblin, but he doesn't. So we're just happy with having dealt that damage, and then our main plan is going to revolve around Ripscale Predator from now on. It's good to know that he has multiple Crazies, so our Gruul Charms could be even better. Croconaw is a good draw. I think that we should mug the Crasis before it gets out of hand. That also gives us some more information on what he's on, and that means we delay the Ripscale Predator by 1 turn, but we also drop Croconaw, so I think that's a fair trade. Okay, yeah, that's somewhat of a blowout. I think we should probably respond here by killing the denizen with pit fight, maybe. We do need to activate the key rune and use pit fight to do that, which is costly, but if the counter gets put on the Krasis, we are facing a 5/3 flyer without any way to stop it, and the denizen is in play, and of course additionally the Shamble Shark as well. I don't think that we can afford that. So as bad as it is, we will have to pit fight here. At least I don't see an alternative, a reasonable alternative. So now here's to hoping that our opponent doesn't have too good of a follow-up, but we'll certainly be able to compete with what he's doing. And if it's only Croconaur and Skinbank Goblin for the evolve. Opponent is hitting for true. That bodes very well for us. It might mean, or it probably means that he doesn't have a creature, or at least not a large creature that would have evolved Shamble Shark. Oh, okay. That's of course also an option. And it's not a bad turn of events for us because we can raise Keymaster Rogue very effectively. However, we have to be aware that he might have a Cypher spell, like Hands of Binding, or in the worst case, Stolen Identity. But I won't worry about Stolen Identity too much for now. It's not the right time to go for a Tin Street Market right now. If we draw another land, then we want to use it to drop Ripscale Predator, and once we have that, then we can start looting away the extra lands. We already spent quite a lot of our removals, so we have to be aware of the Keymaster Rogue potentially becoming a problem. It looks like our opponent is trying to hit another land here, maybe, to play Shamble Shark additionally to Last Thoughts. Maybe he has the Forest already, that's also possible. And that combination here could get out of hand very, very quickly. And this draw is probably the worst. And punishes us for playing the Tin Street Market, it looks like. But what can you do? Okay, it looks like the Tin Street Market did do a good job, because from now on, as long as we don't draw a Scarred Goliath, we will be able to cast any spell we draw, or one of the six drops that we are still holding. However, it's still going to be difficult to raise 2 cards a turn, obviously, and that increases the clock significantly. It means that we might be dead in 2 swings, so that could be a big problem. So what's interesting here is that Ripscale Predator doesn't kill in 2 swings, but with a little help it does it more effectively than Ruination Worm. We are facing down the 2/1, but we can't block these two, so just blocking Shamble Shark with Ripscale Predator is a reasonable line to take, and then trying to win with the Predator while beating down with the other creatures is also reasonable. Oh, there's an interesting thing here. We don't want our opponent to know that he wants to block our creatures, so... Oh wait, yeah, I didn't consider that. Now, if the Shamble Shark comes down, then the Krasis becomes a 1/5, and the Skinbank Goblin, when blocked, is actually just dying to the Krasis. However, our opponent is relying on these two creatures to kill us, so he might not be interested in taking that block. So I'm just going to bluff attack here anyway, and if he decides to Shamble Shark and then grow his Krasis, that's fine with me. That's an interesting decision to block here. Don't know why you would block the 2/4 rather than the 2/1 when you have the Krasis. So our opponent realized that he probably doesn't want to risk his Krasis, of course, but still an interesting line to take. And now we wouldn't have done an extra damage because Croconaw would just have been able to be blocked anyway, or the Krasis would have killed the Goblin and our opponent would have had perfect information. So I like this line a little better because it allows us to maybe draw into Scorch Walker or Zertar Swine to win. However, if our opponent leaves back two creatures and blocks a Ripscale Predator with both of them, then that might actually not be an out. However, with the damage we've dealt, the additional Gruul Charm also threatens lethal damage. So I think we've done a pretty good job of playing to our outs here, even though it might not work out. Okay, Scaptan Charger is probably not going to do it, simply because our opponent has the 5 unblockable damage, so there isn't much we can do about it, but we can just attack with all of our creatures and see what happens. The interesting thing is that the block our opponent is going for here does actually lose to any 5 power Blood Rush card, but which we don't have. So I'm going to Blood Rush here. I don't really care about showing him a card like Scaptan Charger. Don't think that's really relevant, and I might have been able to get him to show me something else from his side. Yeah, we are losing this game, but I think it was a pretty interesting course of events, with the timely Shamble Shark countering our mugging being the biggest problem that we had here. And of course now we are dead. So I think our main deck is probably where we want to be. We have the muggings, we have the Gruul Charms, we have the Pit Fight to punish our opponent for what he's doing. He does play some counters, which we can't do much about. Burst of Strength, not something I want. Tower Defense is a card that's nice against the Krasis, but we have the Gruul Charms, and he also has other ways to make his creatures unblockable. So rather than overloading on effects like this, I think we should be more trying harder to just play our game, and our deck looks built for that purpose. So I don't really see a reason to change anything here. That's a nice draw, not a mulligan. We have a Naya Blitz start here. Gruul Blitz, maybe. And we have going to have an immediate decision to make on how to play this, but I think that we just run out all the 2-drops and then go from there. Of course, the first one of them would also pump the Croconora, but I'm going to take this gift of extra mana and hope that our opponent is a little slow to take off, because then the game might actually be over before it begins. And we are drawing perfectly. The Rampager being a great addition here. Of course, we don't hold back our Croconora here. Even if he has a card like Last Thoughts, he's just dead to our attack. So the only thing that we have to be aware of is that there could be an Either Rise, and I think there was one in the draft, so I'm going to play around that, and then we should be fine. If you didn't know, I think that Either Rise is one of the worst cards that you can be playing in Limited, but I know that there's people that disagree with this. Our opponent is attacking with his Drakewing Krasis, and I'm going to block with Croconora here. I don't know what he's up to, but if he wants to accomplish anything, he at least has to spend mana here. And even if it's only a Scab Clan Charger, it does reduce the cards he could have when I attack next turn. Or he might be forced to play something else. Pit Fight, targeting Drakewing Krasis and Burning Tree Emissary. Well, that's a trade. Not a good one, but it's a trade. And now we have all the Blood Rush in the world to just end this. So we are dealing 7 already. Let's show him the Scorchwalker. And hopefully we can repeat this draw for game 3. Just realized that we have the Bomber Core in the sideboard, and Bomber Core is quite nice against Drakewing Krasis, but it does rely on us being able to trigger it. Not sure if that's something that we can reliably do, but it might be a card that we want in our 40 going into game 3, especially because it gives us these great draws where we just start off very strong with Burning Tree Emissary. I think I'm going to run that rather than Tin Street Market, because his deck being so aggressive probably won't come down to us filtering through all of our deck and then getting a small advantage. If we run Bomber Core, we might also want to play the Burst of Strength. He's also shown his own Pit Fight, so that could be relevant and might force us to take out one of the 6-drops maybe as a way to make our deck a little cheaper. So Burst of Strength rather than Ruination Worm doesn't look too bad, and while we're at it, it almost seems like then we could run 17 lands and only one of these two, only the Key Rune and not the Verdant Haven. But on the other hand, there isn't all that much that we can run that's better than Verdant Haven. Maybe Millennial Gargoyle, but then we are once again overboarding against Drakewing Krasis, where there are other cards that are at least as problematic. So that's a difficult thing. I think that Verdant Haven is probably the weakest card of the bunch, especially when we're on the draw. We are going to naturally draw more mana sources, so it's not as important to drop this. Tower Defense, Millennial Gargoyle, Wildwood Rebirth are reasonable options, I would say. Maybe the Millennial Gargoyle is the way to go. Maybe it's tower defense to be a little more tricky about things. I think that's what we should be going for. Wildwood Rebirth against a deck with no removal. Probably not what we want. Okay, when in doubt, go with the creature rather than the trick. We do have quite a lot of tricks now, so hopefully that works out. And that's a pretty mana intensive hand, but we do have Scar Guildmage, and Scar Guildmage loves to have extra lands. We can also mark a turn 3 Drake-Wing Crisis and then just start attacking with 4/4s. I like this hand, actually. As long as we don't draw Boros Reckoner, we should be fine going into the late game with this. Let's see if that works out. We can at least deal with the first evolved creature or the first Keymaster Rogue or whatever. So getting that turn 2 Guildmage into play should be great. We draw a Powerhouse Millennial Gargoyle. But actually, the Xertas Swine alone is already a great draw, so I don't want to complain too much. Even though we have to skip our turn here, our opponent is on all islands, so this is yeah, a great spot to be in. Yeah, okay, he does find the forest, so we do have a game on our hands. Urban Evolution, he draws another 3. That's interesting, because now we can punish him a little bit by just dropping a fatty and then threatening a lot of damage next turn. Here, both of these cards aren't creatures I want to risk in combat, but if we make the Denizen a 3/4, it's more likely to be able to brawl in there next turn, and I would much rather keep the Guildmage back than the Denizen, especially because the Denizen doesn't look to be too effective from our hand, judging from our hand. Now, the interesting thing is if our opponent is able to keep up 4 mana, for either Rise, in addition to dropping something scary, because that would force us to play accordingly. It looks like that's what our opponent is doing. No, it isn't. Okay, he's playing Last Thoughts on Croconaur. It's interesting. So we do have the 3/4 Denizen already, and we are dealing 10. If all of these come through, is that correct? Yes, 10. So making another 4/4 actually forces our opponent to chump block. We didn't play a land this turn. That's something that's always important to consider. So in this case, our opponent can't block the Guildmage because he would take 12 from the other attackers, which means that he has to block a creature and lose his creature in the process, and that means he goes down to 2. And yeah, I don't think he's coming back from that. He drew all the cards in the world, but if you don't do anything in the first 4 turns of the game in Gatecrash Limited, then yeah, it's just very difficult. That Last Thoughts was a pretty desperate move already. Okay. So the only card that we can put our opponent on here is really Etherized to stay alive. So we can try to play around that a little bit. So if we attack with just Zertar Swine, then he could block and force the trade. Well, then he threatens the trade, but then we could pay 2 mana, and then he would have to actually cast the Aetherize, otherwise he dies to Zertar Swine. Then we have the Zertar Swine in hand, which is okay. It's better than getting the Denizen in there and then having to replay everything. So if anything, I probably want the Swine back in hand because it's a reasonable card to activate. And then we are going to play the Millennial Gargoyle as another way to threaten him. Alternatively, we could just let this resolve. That way we don't run into any other tricks like pit fight maybe, but I'm just willing to let him show us what he's up to. And if we get the Aetherize out of his hand, it also means that we are going to be much safer going into the next turn. And the way this is shaping up, he's going to be forced to play more and more creatures. So we are very fine here. This is a very interesting play. He's bouncing Zertar Swine rather than giving his Crown Ceratok +3/+3, which would have killed the Swine. Of course, it does risk. It is a little bit more risky, but I think in the position that he's in, he has to take that risk. He could have the counter spell for 2 here, but if that's the case, then the Gargoyle would have been countered. There's the pit fight. Was to be expected that he had something, and it's clear that pit fight is a good card for him. Now, our main problem is that we don't have enough red, but I'm just going to try to go for it here. We can pay for his counter spell, and he has no green, so it's just very likely that the Millennial Gargoyle is lethal here. Okay, looks like we did it. He's on, yeah, slow cards, it seems like. Kind of difficult to stop a Scarred Guild Mage when you're a Simic. He had the pit fight for it, but looks like he isn't bitter about it. Yeah, good thing we did this, even with a single red. We managed to overwhelm our opponent, and let's see if we can win the semifinals as well.